But when I started to act positively, it brought again lots of synchronicities. But I started to feel lost because I got so good at being positive about what I didn't really feel positive about. There was a disconnect. I was really good at being a positive thinker. And I also did have that spiritual orientation. It was, Roma Vincent Peale was a minister in a church in New York City. But I didn't have it at a core level. I hadn't even begun to meditate at that time. And I didn't even know how to tap a deeper self. I just knew how to change my mind. That a lot of people can relate. That you want to believe in miracles, but that would kind of be a mental endeavor. So after years of then modeling, I wound up meeting my husband in Europe and coming back to the States, and wound up in Boston, had small children at the time. And instead of now just acting positively, I kind of had this picture-perfect life that I built all around me that emulated a television commercial set. We had a great dog that could have been on commercials. My kids were beautiful little towhead kids that could be on commercials. My husband was the beautiful, doting husband. And everything looked picture perfect. And I felt empty. And I couldn't understand what happened. How did I get here? I was so positive that I, paved this way for myself into this kind of, I was knitting the sweater that the neck got too tight. And so I started to ask, there must be more. I still knew how to go to the divine in ways that were surrendered and positive, but I couldn't find a path or an answer that didn't go beyond just being positive about it. And then between auditions one day, I was in Boston on an audition, and I used to go into bookstores or places where I'd find like peace and quiet and a sanctuary away from the superficial life of modeling and commercial acting. And I wound up in a little bookstore outside in Boston that the owners were devotees of Ramana Maharshi. And they had this beautiful bookstore called Hari-san. And I was browsing the shelves. And at that time, this was about 24 years ago, there was only a little shelf of spiritual books. There was a lot more, Ganesh statues and things, but there were not that many books that were written about high-end spirituality. There was probably some things even from Sivananda or people who were really profound teachers, but I wanted something that felt accessible to me, that would take me where I was. And I had been thinking this for a while. I went to a shelf that had a lot of self-help books on it, and I didn't find anything more than I had been already exploring and knowing about. And then I saw this book across underneath the window, like that window, and there was a shelf, a small shelf underneath the window, and this one book was beaming at me. And I didn't know what it was, and it intimidated me. But when I walked over to it, I was in a place where I was feeling really tired of being the superficial roles that I had been playing in my life, even if they were important, like being a mother and a wife and someone who was a professional. They still felt superficial to me. And I remember I picked up the book, and it literally fell open to a page it was a lesson in A Course in Miracles that says, I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. And I started crying in the store. I closed it because it was hit so much right to my heart. It hit me right in the bullseye. I had been a body. I was, hang the clothes on me, I'll go stand and take a picture of me. Just send me to a commercial set, I'll bite it and smile for the camera. And I had felt like I was, always performing for my parents and other people. I didn't know how to do anything but perform for the good, bad opinions of other people. And so I took the book home, put put it on a shelf, didn't read it for a few months as it intimidated me, but then I kept saying, I gotta read that book. Finally, when I sat down with it, it was so profound to me, it confused the heck out of me because it said things like, this table isn't real, what you're seeing before you isn't real, and I didn't understand that we have our stories around everything in our lives. And it was a mind training that was kind of taking me out of the mode of operandum I was in, that I was so stuck in and didn't even know, and pulling me out of it gently to be able to see from a different perspective. So I hid it under my couch and did the lessons of A Course in Miracles for about 3.5 years without telling anybody. When the kids would go to school, I would take it out and I started to meditate because it says to get still. I am still as God created me. And I started to know what that felt like. And as I did, the confusion started to lessen as I started to live the life of being miraculous. It wasn't as confusing to me as it was on a page when I started to go out, and when it said, be the light of the world today. As a concept, that's really like, what? What does that even mean? But when you go out into the world to bring the light, where before you used to judge it because it's dark, there's a lot of darkness out there, a lot of confusion, a lot of contrast. And if you're judging it, you don't see who you are showing up to it. But if you go out as the light of the world, you start to see, oh, all they needed was light. All anybody ever needs is light. Well, who's going to bring it? If you don't, you have to wait for someone else, and that's frustrating and gets old really, really fast. So that took a while, and I said 3.5 years is a lot longer than the 365 days that the lessons are. And I got through all the lessons and felt really sad because I didn't feel like I got it at my core. Even though if it said be the light and I wasn't good at being the light that day, I'd do it 3, 4, 5 days in a row until I could really feel like, okay, I actually was the light today. No one else would know but me what I was doing. And then towards the end of that experience of the 3.5 years, I was actually writing from that space of connectivity, because I was confused still. Why am I hearing, what's specific about this for me? So I started to ask, and I started to write what I was hearing. And one day, I wrote down what I was hearing, and it said, you are about to close the chasm between my world and your own. You are about to experience the great resolve. And I never heard that, didn't know what it meant, but I was happy. I was going to experience something that I didn't understand. But up until that point, I had done what the Course in Miracles tells us to do, which is forgiveness. Forgive, 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 forgive. Like, you can't show up and be the light of the world if what you see you're judging. You have to forgive all the things that you thought were wrong in your life, and all the things and the people who wronged you. I had just gotten to that place where I realized I did it. And then on the heels of realizing I had forgiven everyone, I realized there was one person left to forgive, and it was me. So I literally got on my knees in front of a chair like that, and I just said, I didn't know it was to me, I was the only one there. Maureen, I forgive you. And that brought about such a feeling of elation and bliss to me that I never had to do that again. I never had to micromanage my world, and I never had to imagine that I knew what I don't know. If we recognize it, if every one of us really got to the place of being a realist, we'd recognize that in any moment that we're judging anything, we're seeing one word of one line in one sentence, in one paragraph, on one page, in a chapter, in a book, where there's volumes, in a library. And we think we know what's going on? So I thought how crazy, how ludicrous that had been, how exhausting that had been, that I pretended to myself that I knew what was happening, ever. And what a sense of freedom I would have if I just gave it up. Just give it up, Maureen, just give it up. And in doing that, when I forgave myself for having ever done that, and done that for my whole life up until that point, that elation was really, from the inside out, a depth of connectivity I had never felt before. I released myself from that, the chains of the mind that thought it knew. And I didn't feel any more than just peace and actually a sense of bliss for one of the first times in my life. I had never known that that existed, or that that was really a feeling you could have. And I went to bed that night, and my husband was out of town, and when he was out of town, I had been a very fearful person, even up until this point. So I would have the dog poised at the window, and I'd have a pair of scissors under the bed, and I'd have the kids sleeping in the bed with me. And I never liked being alone. Like when he was going out for when he was leaving to do a business trip, say, I would be mad at him before he left and mad at him when he came home because I didn't want to be in the house alone. That's how scared I was. And so that night I went to bed and I had this, instead of overwhelming fear about being in the house alone, I still did the whole setup because it was, normal for me to do that. But I felt a sense of peace. And I woke up spontaneously at 3 o'clock in the morning, which would have been the worst nightmare for me, because I would have been afraid to be in the house alone and awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and be afraid and not be able to go back to sleep. But instead of being afraid, I started to have some cramps in my stomach, and I said, well, I believe in miracles now. Heal this. And I was saying it to the same authority that started to speak with me in my life, the part of me that was the real me. And I said, heal this, and when I did, I went shooting out of my body and stayed in a breathless state that I didn't know even existed until years later, quantifying it through the Hindu tradition. But I went out, and I go like this because it was to the right side. I still don't know the significance of that, but I went out and stayed out from that 3 o'clock in the morning till 7:30 the next morning, when I came out of it with my first breath. And in the course of being out of my body, I wound up in the heart of God, which had me then have a first-hand experience of the divine, like no one can ever explain that. The closest I can say, it was like being wrapped in a soft down comforter of love that was endless. There was nowhere to go, and to have been afraid of that entity, or feel that I had to do anything with this that was the allness of everything. As I came down in layers, I came down and had all these revelations, but I came to about where I use my hands because I can only describe kind of what it was like. I came from the utmost and out there of allness. I came down. When I got about here, I started to have the classic near-death experience that people have, what they talk about when they're going through their whole life in timelessness. Seeing all the details of your life in timelessness. So you're seeing your whole life in a matter of, from 3 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock in the morning. I saw my life in detail. And as I saw it, the most focused points were when I was in pain, when I had experienced the worst parts of my life. And I saw myself, miscarriages, things like that. And I saw them through the eyes of God instead of through my eyes. I saw them through the bigger picture of knowing I'm at one with the divine right now. And all I could see was how hysterical it had been that I forgot I was God. as nothing to you. And I felt this rolling, thunderous kind of chuckle. Now you see how I see. Now you see how I see. And I started to watch all of this pain from the bigger picture, the one that's the volumes in the library size, and I could see how it was not what I had thought it was at all. So when I came out of that with that breath in the morning, I expected, I was literally on fire. So if you have ever seen these images of people who are mystics that have these like a fire in their heart, that's literally what it felt like that my whole heart was on fire. And I was shaking from the experience. When I got up, I didn't even know if I could stay on my feet. And I looked and I see the kids in bed, and I realized I'm back in a normal life. I had no idea what had happened to me. And the bathroom was just adjacent to the bedroom, so I walked into the bathroom to splash water on my face to compose myself so I could figure out what I was going to do. And when I came up from the sink, I looked in the mirror and I saw myself without a body. I literally saw a spirit standing in front of me, and I still can't say this without starting to tear up, because the way I looked at myself in the mirror was with the eyes of God. It was with the eyes that were looking at me with such love. I almost fell on the floor because of the eyes that were looking at me were my eyes, but with the love of impeccable love. And I thought, my God, I had been a model all those years, and I thought that was beauty. This, who we all are. I realized we are all this, and we think we're the body. So I go to start the day. I get the kids up. I'm watching them do the things that we do every morning, and I'm watching with the eyes that are seeing what a miracle they are when they're pouring cereal and when they're doing these things that are mundane. Take them to the school. I'm watching parents meeting kids, and it looks like love meeting love. I'm hearing birds singing, and it sounds like a symphony. I'm in a mystical state, in other words. For 3 days I stayed there, where I watched life through the eyes of a miracle. And one of the most profound things was that I wound up going to Kmart. I don't even know if they have Kmarts anymore, but at this time they had Kmart. And I was going to get a greeting card. I don't remember whose birthday it was. And I'm still like going through these motions of trying to look normal while I'm seeing all these things. And I remember there was a man pushing a shopping cart this way, and a woman pushing a shopping cart this way. And it was obvious that they were meant to smile, they were meant to have an encounter. In A Course in Miracles, it's called a holy encounter. Any day, all day, we can have holy encounters. It's when we show up as God meeting God. And I knew it was a setup. It was set up on the divine realms for them to be able to have an encounter that would make their day, and maybe more. And instead, I watched the man get distracted with something, and the woman turn and walk, and I wanted to say, stop, you're missing it. That's a miracle. And that happened all day wherever I was going. I wound up going in to get the card, and when I picked it up, instead of seeing a greeting card, I started to see the truck that brought the card, the guy who unboxed the cards and put them on the shelf, the woman who was in the place who drew the picture dropping her kids off at school and I saw the thousands of lives that had to be involved in getting that card on the shelf to me. And I wasn't appreciative. 1,000 lives got that card on that shelf for me to pick up. And I didn't even ever see that. So from that point on, obviously, my life was completely different, and I didn't know how to speak about it. I remember when I tried to tell my husband, when he came back, we went to lunch, And I thought I can tell him over lunch. And he's like, "You're awful happy." And I started to tell him, and he said, I started to cry because I was crying at everything. You know, it was really hard not to cry because it was so exquisite. Life was so now exquisite, where before I thought it was a problem. And when I started to tell him and I started to cry, he said, "Oh, that's cute." And I knew it wasn't cute. And I said, "Okay, I'm not going to speak about this. This is something that must just be for me to know." And I literally at that time had not read any of the masters. I hadn't read, you know, I didn't know the yoga tradition at all. And so I didn't know how to quantify anything that had happened to me. From that moment on, I found the little section in bookstore that had the mystical people and people who were speaking about things firsthand in their lives, and I started to quantify more and more, and that is what brought me into the Hindu tradition, because literally the Hindu tradition had the most resonance with miracles, with this kind of perception. I found an autobiography of a yogi and started to read about his life, and it was the life I was literally in, where you walk into a place where people tell you to go, and the next thing you know, there's somebody from the other side of the world. It is the life we're all meant to live. The one thing that makes me such a good mouthpiece for this is I'm very normal. I was not a smart kid, and I just finished my master's at Harvard. I only did that because I was trying to prove to myself, you know, can I have a mystic mind and a scholarly mind at the same time? How do you know unless you're doing it? Because I don't know other people that I could ask that, so I figured it must be my job to figure it out. And I am very normal in a day-to-day life. But one thing I did do from that early time, as the girl who walked down the street waving at the man who scared me, was walk into fear, knowing that I would find love. And that's really truly the basis of a miraculous life. We see that we are love. That's who the truth of us is. And we stop listening to that mind, that ego mind that thinks it's everything but, that it can cogitate its way quicker into a wonderful life, that it can make us perform better to be in a happy life, that you're always trying hard and performing for someone. If it's not someone else, it's you, to prove that you're worthy. And I lived that for so long, and fortunately now have been out this side for over 20 years. And in that time, shortly after that experience, people just found me. A parade of people started coming, of people who were in great pain. I never, ever think about this. I was the one who had the scissors under the bed and the dog at the window. Did I want anyone to bring pain into my life? I wanted to avoid it at all costs. But I've wound up, helping in maximum security prisons. I've been in places that I found the most exhilarating in life have been the places that I would have feared the most. And, still, again, that whole idea of just taking off in Asia, I had never been in Asia before. And if I hear I'm not listening to people tell me to go to Chiang Mai, Thailand. I'm listening to the divine speaking through those people telling me to go to Thailand. When I get 4 people, I know that wasn't 1 person, 2 people, 3, that's for me to go. And I don't know, I don't have to know, because I'll get a divine assignment. Now I have to tell you that, so through the next few days that I'm here, I get an opportunity to show you the fast route in all of this. It's 23 years later. I've honed this with thousands of people who've come to me in their life's greatest challenges and pain. And I know the fast route out. I've not had anyone come to me in that time, in those 23 years of constant parade of people. It's never stopped. I can leave and go someplace and no one even knows where I am, and before I know it, people are there. And the one thing that happens is within one conversation, within one time of speaking, they're laughing, even if they've been wanting to commit suicide for a long time, have done terrible, awful things in their life, have had disease and suffering. They're laughing, and you know why? Because I don't see any of it as real. I can only see what I saw in the parking lot when we're missing the people that are the graces in our life, and we're missing what's really going on underneath it all. And so what I'm here to do is to unveil it so that you're going to see it too. And then it's up to you to do the most important part, and that's live it. And then once you live it, you're going to know it. It won't be me being a mouthpiece convincing you of anything. It'll be you having miracle after miracle after miracle in your own life. And then maybe we'll wind up in another country somewhere, and we'll run into each other in a fun and amazing circumstance. But you'll know that you were led there and that you were guided there. And you'll know that you're there because it's the divine speaking to you the same way the divine speaks to me. So about 12 years ago, maybe just before I came to the ashram for the first time, I was walking on the beach because I used to live in Hollywood Beach, just across the ocean from here. And I used to wake up. I went there specifically to live in a place where I could meditate on the sunrise. I had been to India to St. Ramalinga's spiritual ashram. St. Ramalinga was a beautiful saint. They still feed people every day since he was there in the late 1800s. I believe it was the late 1800s, but you'll have to check on that. And he had a lot of disciples. It was a very holy and beautiful person, and he said, I'm done. I'm gonna go to the light. And he dissolved into the light. And so one time I was in India and met with disciples of his disciples, and they showed a meditation of meditating on the sunrise to a few of us. And so from that point on, when I got home back in the States, I realized I can't find a sunrise. There's trees everywhere, there's buildings everywhere, but there's no sunrise. So I had asked the divine, I don't care where you put me or what you do with me, but I want to be able to meditate on the sunrise. Then I wound up on Hollywood Beach here, and there's beautiful sunrise every day. And I used to walk the beach, and one day when I was down the far end of the beach, I had asked, how is the best way for me to impart this capacity to be and live a miraculous life? And I heard this whole thing came intact, and here's what it is. This is what we're going to be doing at the workshop. It's the transformational triad, and you see the fire in the middle. That's where I wound up in the fire. But it's miracle-mindedness, which is, I always use the eye because it's the third eye. But it's miracle-mindedness is where you start to see the miraculous everywhere. You start to be able to, oh, it's up. I didn't see that. Thank you. Miracle-mindedness is where you start to see the miraculous everywhere, and I call that embrace because you're starting to embrace a life that you never knew existed, even though it's your own life. You don't go anywhere, you don't have to do anything other than begin to live your life in a way that you're looking for the miraculous. And then miracle matrixing is where you embody it, and I find that that's the place that most, if anyone's gone off a spiritual path that was a profound path, it's because they start to talk about it prematurely. You know, that's why we have the swamis here who've been living this and embodying it for so long, that then they can talk about it from a place within them, that they have the firsthand experience of the things they're speaking about. When you start to speak about it, and I don't mean just in conversation where it's like a motivated conversation between friends who are happy to share good stories. I mean about the deepest depths of things. It's quite often much more important that it's between you and you, that you're cultivating and building this divine energy within you, because it's the outer world That's the illusion of things. It's the part that we've created from a world of many separate minds. That if we start looking outside for answers or validation, that it pulls us away from this part that's the knowing self. So the matrixing is when you start to do what I did unknowingly that was so powerful for me was when I hid the book under the couch and just did it by myself without needing anyone else's approval. It's why you feel that feeling when you come into meditation here where you want to put the scarf over your head. You know, you innately know this is between you and you. And that you're the one who gets to know if you're living it or not. You know if you're living it or not. I knew that I was transcending my fear when I waved to the man. I didn't care who saw me in the world. I knew that was between me and me at an age that was pretty young to get that kind of a thing. I didn't know what to do with it, but I was getting it. And then miracle mastery is when we actually live it out loud with other people, and at that point your life is your prayer. Your life is your story. Your life is what you don't have to convince people, they see it. You show up at the perfect time when they're ready to receive. You'll notice that a lot of people feel this when they leave a beautiful experience like being at the Sivananda Ashram, and you all go to the different places that you live and you're wondering, how am I going to talk to my husband about this? How am I going to talk to my best friend about this? Maybe you don't. Maybe you live it in front of them. Maybe they see you smile more often, and maybe they see you take the kinder road to yourself, and maybe they see you be more patient than you were before you were here. And then when they really, really, really want to know, that's when you tell them. And you don't even have to use many words. It's as important as smiling at a time when typically you would have been crazy and off the handle. And they'll want to know because you're embodying it. So there's a whole lot more to this, so many little innuendos and tiny things that we sandpaper in our own lives that we're so hard on ourselves, you know? And sometimes it's just the edges that are rough and we need a little sandpapering. And sometimes it's just a little bit of a tweak to get you back in alignment with who you really are. And that's what we're going to talk about during the workshops, during the day. And to get you more in alignment with living it so that you can expect to see miracles. And I'm going to say this, you'll probably experience a lot of miracles before you leave, even while you're here, because this place is so conducive to that. But instead of judging yourself harshly, maybe for not breathing correctly or sitting, straight enough in meditation, let yourself opt to be kind to yourself first. And then as you do that and receive, relax. Again, the one who relaxes the most wins here. And you'll notice that that's what the divine always wanted for you, was for you as that miraculous baby who came into this life that everyone knew was a miracle. All you had to do was relax from that point on. Look, we worked so hard, we didn't even have teeth. Everyone was feeding us. We didn't even have teeth. And we knew we were a miracle. We were tapped in. We knew we were okay. And now here we are, so much older and wiser, working so hard. So we're about to enter a real fun and miraculous time. And everybody, hopefully, a lot of you can be here. If you're not, I do have a little ebook that I just made that people can download called The Miracle Worker's Guide to the Galaxy. And anybody can get information about that from me just on my website. And truly, I hope that everyone wants to join in on this miraculous path because it's too much fun to miss. And being here in the ashram is absolutely the perfect jump-on point for all of the miraculous lives you're all meant to live. And it's the perfect complement. This place of being here with, they got it. This is a result of their miraculous nature. You being here now is a result of their miraculous nature. They're still here. they still embody the divine here. And do take advantage of being in this space, even if it's just to lay out in the ocean, lay out on the sand, and just soak in the energy of the divine that exists here. Big vortex of energy, of powerful miracle energy. So I think that's about it for tonight. Everyone get a great night's sleep. Rest is one of the other great things that's conducive to miracles. So rest well, and hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you.